Welcome to Braunton on the Move, produced by the Explore Braunton Project. We're about to bring the history of Braunton to life and hope that you enjoy this unique experience. On your screen now is a map showing the route that we'll be taking. We'll begin by walking to the Greatfield. It will take a few minutes to get there, so please walk at your own pace. Remember to take care of cars in the car park and on the surrounding roads. In a minute we'll set off around the side of Braunton Countryside Centre and turn left to follow the River Quay, which flows alongside the car park. We will soon see a stone bridge. Please make sure that you are safe from passing traffic when you reach this point. When you're ready, let's go. You've made it into the first zone. On this side of the bridge you can see Score Farm. For many years it was one of around 20 farms in Braunton, many of which were in the village itself. Farms were generally self-sufficient and made enough money to survive on, but not much more. Each would typically have a small herd of cows, which were relatively tame because they were often hand-reared, some pigs, chickens, geese and turkey, which were useful at Christmas time. The farmers had to move their herds from the grazing lands on the outskirts of the village to the farmsteads at milking time, and this meant that 7 different herds had to cross the village square. They often became mixed up with each other, yet the wrong cow never arrived home with the wrong farmer. It must have been an amazing sight, the square full of cows, dogs and men shouting. One young man was employed as a road sweeper to clear away the quantities of muck created by the cows and horses. It took him the whole day to clear from one end of the village to the other, by which time, of course, he had to start all over again. Hordern's Mill was once located on the opposite side of the bridge and would have used the River Quay to turn the mill wheel. The mill ground barley to be used as feed for the village's farm animals. The introduction of modern machinery, however, meant that the water was no longer needed to turn the wheel. This mill, along with the 2 others in the village, closed in the early 1900s. Farms too have disappeared, but certain houses in the village still retain the telltale characteristics or are named after farms they used to be. The photograph on your screen shows how the bridge looked when the railway used to run past it. Can you see the locomotive in the background? In a moment we'll go over the bridge and turn left alongside the River Quay. We'll then turn immediately right between the 2 houses and follow a path away from the river, which is known as Mill Stile, a reference to Hordern's Mill. Turn left onto the road at the end, and then look for the footpath on your right, next to the Sea Scout building, which leads along the edge of the cricket pitch. You've now made it to the edge of Braunton Greatfield. Before we go onto the field, did you notice the brick structure on the right of the stile? That's a relic from World War II and was known as a pillbox. Here, members of the Home Guard could watch for airborne or seaborne invasion following the fall of France in 1940. Braunton Greatfield, being a broad open expanse, was identified as a possible landing ground for German gliders or paratroops. Chivenor, a former RAF base and home of Coastal Command during the Second World War, was identified as a likely target of any such landings because if the airfield was taken, enemy troops could be flown in. The field would therefore have had obstacles on it to prevent gliders from landing. These might well have been old farm machinery and wagons placed strategically at times of alert. This pillbox was one of many located on the perimeter of Chivenor, which these days is a base for the Royal Marines. Turning back to the field now, the history of the Greatfield starts in much earlier times. It's said that to step onto Braunton Greatfield and walk on land that has seen such little change for so many years is to journey into the medieval past. The Greatfield covers an area which is roughly equal to 200 football pitches. The Saxons were the first to divide the field into strips, which measured 1 chain by 1 furlong to make an acre of land. It was thought that an acre was the area that an ox could plough in 1 day. On your screen now is a diagram showing these measurements. These ancient forms of measurement are not much used today, but it's worth noting that chains are also used to measure cricket pitches, where the distance from one wicket to the other is 1 chain or 22 yards. You can see a real chain that was used in the village at Braunton Museum. The strips were usually owned by the lord of the manor and farmed by tenant farmers who might farm a single strip or many at once. The picture on your screen shows the strips held by the Courtney family in 1842. The Courtneys were a powerful family who held the earldom of Devon for many centuries. The names you can see on the map are those given to areas on the Greatfield, such as Cutterbarrow, Gallowells and Long Hedgelands. The next interactive zones are named after the areas we passed through. Let's continue now onto the field. Climb over the stile and turn right, following the field boundary to meet the end of Second Field Lane. It's important to keep off the field as much as possible. The farmer may have planted crops such as wheat or potatoes here, and there may be ground nesting birds such as the skylark. When we reach Second Field Lane, we turn left and follow the track towards the centre of the field. Well done, you've made it, and it's certainly worth the walk. You can now see the expanse of Braunton Greatfield opening before you. In medieval times, there would have been many villagers working on the field at once. Braunton men were generally farmers working on the fields or sailors off at sea. Even in living memory, there were up to 80 men with 15 to 18 teams of horses working on the Greatfield, each walking 16 miles per day. This picture shows farmer Sidney John Hartnell with a foal thought to have been taken in the early 1900s. Once grown, the foal may easily have become part of a working team.
Women and children had special roles on the Greatfield and could often be seen taking part in the hay and corn harvest, as well as helping to lift the potatoes and hoe the mangoes and turnips. After the potato harvest, the women went over the land and picked up the small potatoes, which, when washed, could be sold for 2 old pennies per peck, which is just over 1 kilo.
Can you imagine the daily life here, tending to the land alongside your neighbours? There were, of course, no machines to help before the war, but as time passed, farming methods became more sophisticated, and this film shows one of the earliest tractors being employed near here. Let's continue now further into the centre of the field. Keep walking until you reach the next interactive zone, which is about 5 minutes walk. Take a moment to look around. You're now standing in the centre of one of only 2 surviving open strip field systems in the UK. It looks like one huge field because something is missing. Can you think what it is? There are no hedges here, and there never have been. The entire acreage has always been as open as it is today. The earliest fertilisers were seaweed gathered from nearby beaches, or lime that was fired in one of the multitude of lime kilns in the area. Each fertile strip was marked by turning the ploughshares in to create a boundary known as a landshed. The strips were grouped into various furlongs, and these in turn were marked with large boulders known as bondstones. Many strips have been lost because owners have bought strips adjacent to each other and turned them into one large plot. The bondstones too have succumbed to modern farming methods. On your screen now is a series of pictures showing how the strips have changed from 1842 to 1950 to 1983. Some strips still exist, and on your screen now you'll see some good examples. The vegetables grown here are often sold direct to the public from nearby farms. The tour continues to the left. We'll meet you at the next zone, Pitlands. You've made it to the next zone. These days the Great Field is farmed by a small number of farmers. Some of these farmers are from families that have farmed here for generations. One such person is Reg Ashton, whose father and grandfather worked this land before him. Look on your screen, here he comes now.
Well, been farming out here, get it, way back in 18 some odd, you know. It's family after family, like, you know. Great-grandfather, grandfather, my father, and me, like, you know. Especially back in those days, that was the best time of our lives, you know. You'd be out here, like, driving the team bosses, and the seagulls would be coming behind, you know, picking up the worms that you rake up. And up skylarks, you could hear them up in the sky, twittering away all day. Sometimes out here in Braunton Field, in the summer you wouldn't hear a sound. You know, everything was quiet in those days, you know. The farms in Braunton, you see, was just one little village, you know. See, there was 7 streets and there was 6 of them had farms, like I told you, you know. Yeah. You know, fantastic, you know. Everybody was busy, going forward and back, you know. And all your little shops, you know, everybody made a little living, you know. We used to supply them with a few spuds or a cabbage or a swede or, you know, self-supporting. Yeah. We were self-supporting in those days, you know. It's a proper job. I just enjoyed it. I wouldn't change for anything. If I had my life over again, I'd do it again, you know. A lot of the whole farmers in Braunton would, you know. Of course, the trouble is I've outlived them all. And we was happy what us was doing, and we was contented, you know. Yeah. But I can't stand your yapping all day. I got a lot of work to do. Cheerio then. Bye. Thanks for coming.
That was fascinating. Thanks, Reg. We're now going to walk on in the direction of the village until we reach the boundary hedge. If we keep walking towards the edge of the field, we'll soon see a gate in the hedge to our right, which leads into a small enclosed field. We'll need to stop again there. Here we are again. This is a good point at which to look at other landscape features. From here we can see Braunton Village, and if we look carefully on top of the hill we can see St Michael's Chapel. It was built in the 15th century as a votive chapel for sailors and fishermen, where prayers were said for them and a lookout kept. It was a conspicuous landmark from the sea. Turning slowly to the left we can see West Hill, which is also known as Braunton Beacon because there used to be a signal beacon on top of it, which was used during the Spanish Armada. Sailors' wives would gather at the beacon, and when they spotted ships approaching the bar, they would descend the hill and scurry along South Street to Velator to meet their husbands. This was not necessarily because they wanted to give them a homecoming kiss, but more likely because they wanted to relieve them of most of their wages before they could spend the lot in the Mariner's Arms. Turning much further left to look over the Great Field, we can see Saunton Sands Hotel, a large white building on the headland. There is an excellent panorama from this hotel over Braunton Burrows, the Great Field and much more. You will see more of this magnificent view if you decide to take the Shifting Sands tour another time. If we keep turning, we can see Braunton Burrows on the horizon. This is a vast system of sand dunes, and the largest dune, called Flagpole Dune, is the one with the greatest amount of bare sand showing. These burrows are the largest sand dune system in the UK and are so unique and diverse that they form the core of the country's first newly designated UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, a world-class designation. To continue our tour, we must turn here and follow the footpath across the small enclosed field and the next to emerge onto the road at the end. Take care here. Turn right and follow the road to Velator Quay, where we'll locate the next interactive zone.
Ahoy there, mateys!
Velator Quay used to be a thriving commercial harbour, and during its heyday in the mid-1800s, it was one of the busiest ports on this coast. Produce from the grapefield would have been loaded onto boats like those on your screen now, and transported not only to London's Covent Garden, but also to markets around the world. A great variety of other materials were traded through Velator, including coal, iron ore from local mines, gravel, scrap iron, railway sleepers, pit props, salt and other minerals, vegetables, cereals and manure, to name just a few. There were, of course, a great many fishing boats here, and indeed many Braunton families made their living from the sea. Some fishermen were known to have travelled as far as Newfoundland to fish. Two local residents, Len Baglow and Sam Mitchell, were just teenagers when they first went to sea.
Well, there was a time when vessels handled all the cargoes. Everything had to be shifted.
Yeah, well that's all it was, no lorries.
There's no lorries or nothing.
No lorries, everything had to come cream everywhere. The shipping,
Yeah,
say you should come and or be going down, when it's be going down right the land. One after the other, and it'll be there wobbling. The water should be up there, 5 bush one, because the rail was up, I see it, or had a high rail on there. There's carry anyway water on deck, you know. Well imagine, from the water to the deck, 18 inches, the freeboard, that's all it was. You're standing on the deck, and you are 18 inches higher in the water, and you say it's coming halfway up the mast. Full in there, and then there's just wobbling like this. Next one comes there, wobbles again. You think, I wonder if there is, then all of a sudden they're starting to even off like. God damn the ship's some water.
Did they ever get scared?
No, you don't get scared. I can't swim, I never bothered. One hand for yourself and one for the ship.
Yeah, that didn't never bloody work,
No,
did it?
no.
It was 2 hands for the ship most
Aye.
times.
For,
And the boats have changed too, I guess, haven't they? Lots of small boats at Velator now.
it's all pleasure. You look there now, it's all pleasure. When us is out there, it's all work. All barges. And barges.
Well, they wouldn't be allowed there like it is now.
No.
The only one I knew ever had a boat there was Stanley Rogers.
Yeah. And then it's all working, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All wheat boats, salmon boats, and about 3 barges. And the vessels as they come up. So the barges is bring up, about 30 ton each.
What would happen now if a vessel went up the Barnstable? You wouldn't be able to move on the banks for
No.
people watching.
Yeah.
And yet it was a common occurrence.
Commons, yeah, everywhere.
In fact, there were so many at times that there weren't enough pilots.
Yeah.
We'd go to Lydney to load, and when we were outside of Lydney, inside would be a forest of masts. And you know, the old time our Rogers, mate, he could tell you every bloody ship by looking at the mast. You know, recognise which so-and-so's in there, so-and-so's in. And the same come out tide time when it was all loaded. The old heap come out of Lydney and go down Channel.
Yeah. Now you go to the Bristol Channel, you can't see one.
Yes, the days will never be seen again.
Moving on now, it's time to turn, keeping the river to our right, and follow the path towards the village, staying close to the bank. We'll soon reach the weir, where we'll reveal another intriguing part of this landscape. Did you spot any wildlife on your way here? It's not unusual to spot a heron, an egret, a redshank, or even a kingfisher or otter. On your screen now, there is a film of a kingfisher seen very near here. This area is also famous for Tarka the otter, so keep your eyes open. This is where the River Quay and Knoll Water meet. It is also the site of a sluice gate, which is used to control the amount of water entering the drainage system of Braunton Marshes. It is located here because it's just beyond the tidal reach of the estuary and therefore clear of salt water. There are some images on your screen now of Braunton Marshes. The marshes are another key area of Braunton, which were reclaimed from the sea between 1811 and 1857 to provide rich grazing land. The area the marshes cover is more than 4 times as large as that of the Greatfield, and they are abundant with wildlife. The engineering involved in draining the marshes was complicated but expertly carried out by county engineer James Green. He used Dutch and Irish labour, and to this day the water levels are accurately controlled by the system of weirs and sluice gates. Take care now as you descend the steps to the road. Turn right to cross the bridge and walk along the road to the roundabout. There you need to turn left and look for the start of the footpath or cycleway ahead, next to Tesco. I'll catch up with you halfway along the path. Well done. You're on the right track in more ways than one. It may be hard to imagine now, but this path follows the route of the old railway line, which used to run from Barnstaple through Braunton and on to Ilfracombe. The roundabout we have just passed was built on the site of the crossing, known as Velator gates. Railway tracks have traditionally been measured in chains. If you remember the system of measurement we talked about earlier, whereby one chain equals 22 yards, Braunton Station was known to be 217 miles and 18 chains from London's Waterloo. The railway's arrival heralded change for industry in Braunton. Transporting goods by rail supplanted shipping, and as a result, Velator Quay began to decline. The line was opened in 1874 and was extremely popular among holidaymakers, giving strength to the area's growing tourism industry. A direct line from London's Waterloo Station meant that as many as 25 trains travelled in each direction. In the 1930s, the line carried 10,000 people to Ilfracombe per day. Troops stationed in Braunton during the war also used the railway line and travelled home from nights out in Barnstaple, giving rise to curiosities such as the boozer train. We'll follow the path now all the way to the end. At the end, we'll continue almost straight ahead, around the old signal post, which you may notice ahead of you, and along Station Road towards the police station. Take care of the traffic. You'll notice some railway tracks embedded in the road near the police station. Stop when you find these. The railway track that you can see here is probably the only clue to the railway's existence in Braunton. However, the police station and the car park behind it have been built on the site of the sidings, where the bankers used to wait. Bankers were engines that waited here until a passing train needed help up the steep gradients or bank into Ilfracombe. They were coupled to the train and helped to push it up the line, returning to Braunton afterwards to be ready for the next train. At the busiest times, the trains had so many carriages that they required 2 bankers to help them along, meaning that 3 locomotives sometimes shared the strain. Now you can see a picture of the station master, Mr. Rowden, on the platform in about 1915. He would have kept the station running smoothly and looking immaculate. I dread to think what he would have thought of the way the station looks now. To see the station master's house, we must continue across the car park ahead of us and bear right to return to the point where we started, outside Braunton Countryside Centre. Are you ready? Let's set off. Carefully through the car park then, being mindful of cars. So here we are in what used to be Braunton Station. The pictures on your screen show how the station used to look. Braunton Countryside Centre now stands where the rails used to be. Wensley's newsagent to the left of the exit road was once the station master's house on the side of the platform. This photo shows the house in the foreground. Statistics from Braunton Station in the early 1930s suggest that rail freight was widely varied. As well as passengers, the trains would carry telegrams, parcels, milk, coal and minerals, horses and other livestock. As you can see from your screen now, flowers from the nearby bulb farm were loaded onto trains here, destined for the markets all over the country. Indeed, Mr. Ashton, who we met earlier, sent potatoes from the Great Field to market in Kidderminster in Worcestershire. With time, the popularity of rail travel gave way to the motor car, and the last steam engines to work on this line disappeared in the mid-1960s. The cheaper diesel engines continued services until the autumn of 1970, when the line was finally closed. In 1949, a steam locomotive was named after Braunton. It has been recently rescued from the scrap heap and has now been restored to its former glory. It can now be seen working at the West Somerset Railway, which is just over the Devon-Somerset border. This concludes our tour. We really hope you've enjoyed it. On the screen now are the names of some of the people and organisations who have made this tour possible. There is much more to Braunton than we've been able to show you today. For more information, why not visit our website at www.explorebraunton.org or visit the Braunton Museum or Countryside Centre.